Hello, I'm Cameron Hudson. I'm the Global Director of Marketing for a large pharmaceutical company. And 14 years ago, I was privileged to undertake an expedition to the South Pole with the expedition partner, Optical Express. When we landed on the ice, we landed at a permanent a permanent sort of science station, and there are some modular buildings and a small number of tents. And because there's a number of activities going on in Antarctica at any particular time, getting supplies out to those expeditions or scientists needs to be coordinated through a central point. So you wouldn't describe it as a village, but there was a small settlement of maybe 50 people that would service the aeroplanes, put fuel in things. There was a communal tent where people would go and maybe cook their food together. So that's where we acclimatized there for a couple of days before actually setting off for real. When we left for real, it was a bit strange because where we'd landed, the start point was 2 days north from there. So actually we went north, and in 2 days we would have walked back to the station again. So it was almost like a false start. But in order to cross the 10-degree line of latitude, we needed to go slightly further north to start. So that was a bit strange because we set off 2 days later, we were back to the place that we'd arrived at before we went forward again. So that was a little bit strange, but it did give us a chance to acclimatize, get used to the tents. If people's insoles were rubbing them, there was an opportunity to change a few things or lighten the sled. If for whatever reason we'd overloaded. But once we got going for real and we left the settlement behind, then it didn't take long to start to feel the isolation and the fact that you were out there and you were all alone. So the typical day was broken up into 90-minute sledging sessions. So we'd always walk for 90 minutes. We would stop maybe for 5 minutes. Any longer than that, we'd start to get cold, and then we'd do another 90 minutes. So typically we would do 6 to 7 90-minute slots. And we would always ask the question at the end of the day, how are people feeling? Who is able to push? And as long as it was unanimous, all three said we would do an extra 90 minutes, we would. So sometimes it was 7 or 8. But towards the end of the expedition, we were really pushed for time. We'd had a lot of bad weather and we weren't as far ahead as we needed to be. Our logistics company had politely threatened to pull us out if we didn't achieve a certain distance by a certain time. So we really had to think about how we cover ground. Now the advantage of being in Antarctica is 24-hour daylight. So it didn't matter whether you slept once in a 24-hour period or once in a 30-hour period, there was always sunlight up ahead. So what we actually did was extended the day. Yeah, that was strange because the sun was just constantly overhead, and you think that would be great, nice and warm, but actually the sun made very little difference. Actually, the days when it was overcast, it was warmer, quite considerably warmer. But as soon as the clouds lift, there's no moisture in the atmosphere. It's very dry, and the temperature just plummets. So yeah, the sleeping in 24-hour daylight was a challenge. Using the face masks and all manner of sleeping pills to try and get some decent sleep. The feeling of getting to the South Pole was quite surreal. We'd had 58 days of not being at the South Pole, and the last 4 or 5 days we knew we were close. Constantly looking at the horizon, is there any sign of the South Pole research station, which is at the South Pole? And the day we arrived, I remember a beautiful day. We'd all been looking on the horizon for a little black speck, and we saw, we heard the sound, actually, we heard it first, the sound of an aeroplane which was coming in to land at the military base at the South Pole. And we saw it and we tracked it and we saw it just touch down on the horizon. And then we walked a little more, and slowly the buildings came into view. And it was such elation at that moment to think that we'd finally done it. And the South Pole itself, there is the research base there. There's probably several hundred people who live at the South Pole, and it was literally like being on the moon. They had this building that was up on stilts. People came out to meet us and to congratulate us for arriving there. So for something which in my mind would have been such a quiet affair, you know, you arrive, you ring the plane, come and pick us up. It was quite surreal that it was almost like a hero's welcome. There were people there. There was actually a US film crew there doing some filming, and they started to film my US colleague who they were very interested in as well. So it was really quite a strange feeling, but one of elation. And yeah, so many clear memories of arriving and then the following days of being at the South Pole. There is a South Pole. There's a South Pole that you'll see on the pictures with the metal sphere. That's plugged into the ice, but the unfortunate thing is that the ice moves. So what they have to do is keep that South Pole for the photographs, and a short distance away there's a small spike which they can move around because the geographic South Pole does move a little bit. So yeah, we managed to get a photograph at the ceremonial South Pole as well as at the actual South Pole. Would I do it again? I would do it again in a heartbeat. I would, yeah. I'd do it differently. There are things that I would do differently. I would approach it mentally differently. I'd look to try to enjoy it from day one, because if you're not enjoying the journey, what's the point? And I think that was one of the key things for me, is that, you know, setting out on a task, we put so much expectation on the end point, the final deliverable, and we forget to enjoy the journey there. So making sure that in a 59-day expedition that I can enjoy and find some level of reward and satisfaction from days 1 to 58, and that it's not all just hinging on day 59.